Thank you, everybody. It's great to be here. Bonjour and hello. I'm going to speak to you today about the topic of zero trust and why Canada needs a zero trust strategy for both government and private sector. And I wrote an article about this, about 6 to 8 months ago in the Toronto Star. And of course, when you talk about zero trust, it's a new concept in the United States. It was just adopted, and it was adopted for several reasons. But the main reason was, after SolarWinds, they found out that a lot of the government and agency and private networks were already corrupted. There were already people inside. Plus, they didn't know who had access, identity access management. They didn't know how many devices were connected. And it's very difficult to organize a risk management cybersecurity strategy if you don't know what's already in your network. So zero trust started out basically is being able to identify what may be in there, everyone, every person, every device connected. And it makes sense because you have to really almost start from scratch nowadays. And as we found out again with SolarWinds, you don't know where they've moved laterally. So the US government adopted that strategy, and private sector in the US and around the world is also starting to adopt that strategy. It's just one of a few strategies. And I'm going to give you a quick overview of what that strategy is, and also some of the challenges. And first I'm going to give you Can you hear me on this? Okay. A view of what the cyber threat ecosystem is. And you all know this, but it's concisely in one place. And the interesting thing, I think, is that many countries just don't see themselves as targets. They say, why does anyone want to go after Canada? Well, the reason they want to go after Canada is the same reason they would go after everyone else, primarily financial. Most companies and even governments and state and local governments in the United States have been highly targeted because of ransomware and extortion. They're able to get paid. The other reason is after the Ukraine invasion, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Russian hackers or affiliated hackers sought out to attack any NATO country or any groups that were supporting Ukraine. And of course, Canada's in that field too. So there's a lot of reasons why Canada has to be concerned with the atmosphere and ecosystem of cybersecurity. So the cyber threat actors, typical actors are state actors, which are more involved, organized criminal gangs, which are many, and they really have taken the place of the brick and mortar crime because it's more profitable and it's quicker and it's less likely you're going to get caught. Hacktivists, of course, industrial espionage, foreign espionage, and terrorist and insider threat. They're all threats, and the means or vehicles they use to get to you are, of course, malware, and that's also being done in more sophisticated ways. They're downloading what is called polymorphic malware, which actually morphs and changes its form, so it's harder to detect. And that's also with the aid of artificial intelligence and machine learning. Social engineering, which is also enabled by artificial intelligence and machine learning, where they know enough about you to exploit and get through with phishing attacks. And phishing attacks and spear phishing attacks are still the two most prominent ways to get breached. There's man-in-the-middle attacks, botnets, which are, again, now expanding. Anytime you really go to any website, you're probably being trailed by a botnet, but they're also being used for nefarious purposes. Distributed denial of service is back in vogue. A lot of websites are being attacked. Insider attacks are always a threat. Cryptojacking, mining, fileless attacks, SQL injection, cross-site scripting, and the zero-day vulnerabilities, and of course ransomware, which is really become, it's been around for over a decade. Probably 15, 20 years actually, and now there's like 124 different types of ransomware, but now it's also being mechanized by algorithms supported by machine learning, so it's pretty potent. So the trends from our neighboring booth here, I use some of these in the article in Toronto Star, is that, what's happening in Canada, and really what's happening in Canada is no different than it's happening everywhere else. You're seeing AI-powered cyber attacks, from these new generative platforms like ChatGPT and Bard, and they're getting more and more aggressive. They're able to develop their own code and do all kinds of things with them, and we're just in the early stages of this. They're going to see more and more of this, and particularly in phishing attacks, where the sophistication and the the company or the business you may work for is replicated. So it's very difficult to detect. You're seeing, and again, more ransomware operators. The difference here, I think, in the last 5 years is that a lot of these operators have started sharing tools. And not just on the dark web, but among different criminal organizations. As a matter of fact, they made it into a sub-economy. They pay for them, and here's a victim, and here, give me X amount of money, and we'll give you that share. So that's really been exploited, and again, that's also a threat to Canadian organizations. And of course, data breaches, and the biggest threat usually is supply chain, third-party breaches. Because of the vulnerabilities, you have more of an attack surface, you have different vendors that are not necessarily following the same protocols and security. So those kind of attacks are been very much exploited, and that's a very difficult one to prevent because you really have to have everyone in your chain protected, and that is where everyone's going to right now. Geopolitical tensions, I mentioned, really are a big issue. There's conflicts all over the world right now, and nation states have integrated these cyber attacks with kinetic attacks, and also they've expanded the playing field by attacking everything, anything connected to it. So it's not necessarily only Ukrainian companies, as I mentioned, are getting attacked. It's everyone that may have any kind of affiliation or pro-positive feeling, and that's true all over the world. You're seeing the threats on IoT and OT devices, and this is something that's pretty scary. A few months ago, it's actually over a year now, actually, there was an attack on a pipeline in the United States, and that pipeline had to be shut down because they didn't know if the IT and the OT had been infected. They knew the IT was there, but nowadays in a lot of these legacy systems, the IT operates over the OT systems, and so they didn't know if there was any cross-pollination. So the pipeline, Colonial Pipeline, was basically shut down. It shut down all the oil on the east coast of the United States for almost 2 weeks. So that was just an example, because when you're talking about IoT devices, you're adding so much more to the attack surface. They say by 2025, the average person will be connected to 5 devices, and that's more than just their phones. It could be their alarm systems in their house. It could be their Alexa or whatever. So all those are avenues for attackers, and they're exploiting them. And they're exploiting by identifying them and finding where the vulnerabilities are. I don't know if you remember last year, Ring was exploited. Cameras most people have on their doorbell. Everything, even baby monitors. So it's really more difficult to protect, particularly if you're not a big business or a government, just a consumer. So those threats are really big. And it's estimated by Cisco, I think, now that there's over 50 billion IoT devices. And if you take the sensors involved, it's in the trillions. So that's just growing. So IoT is a very strong and persistent threat. So how do we deal with this? And as I mentioned, the first thing, it was zero trust, because we don't know it's there. We have to find with our system who has access, who's connected, and stuff like that. But there are other strategies too. And the traditional strategy for most companies, big companies and governments, has been defense in depth, where you actually bolt on your hardware, your software, all your tools that are being sold everywhere. And you may have maybe 35, 40 different tools to orchestrate if you're an IT person or a CISO. So I think it's a very difficult endeavor, and it doesn't really alleviate the threat. And actually, in some cases, it can create more threats because it gives more avenues. And often, these CISOs and these IT shop people leave. Plus, there's a dearth of them already. So defense in depth is still viable in many terms, because you have to, air gapping is good, and doing all the technological processes and backing up your data, having the right security and encryption is still very important. But now there's a new movement, and this was just actually 2 weeks ago in the United States. DHS, Department of CISA, which protects all the critical infrastructure, came out with a strategy called Security by Design. And Security by Design is really, I think, something that every government has to do now, because if you look at your critical infrastructure, whether it be finance, transportation, energy, a lot of this is built on systems that are over 30 years old. The technology is old. It's often isolated. It's not really well protected. So what they came up with is that, we made a mistake when we created the internet. We didn't build it for security, right? We built it just for communication. But now at least we're moving forward with new technologies that are, nanotechnologies and much better material science and other things we're doing to replace this old technology. Let's design it up front for security. So that's what's being mandated now in the United States, and I think it should also be mandated in Canada. And these systems need to be agile, they need to be operational, and they have to have a cyber fusion to monitor and recognize and respond to threats. And a lot of this is being delineated right now. There's risk management things. If you go to a website called NIST, they have risk management platforms. One of them is also dealing with security by design, also with artificial intelligence, and also with critical infrastructure. So you have all these, a variety of threats that are now in there. So, what is the best process then to do? I mean, when you're looking at, this is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, so the first thing, of course, is cyber hygiene. And if you're a company, mid-sized company, whether you're in Canada, whether you're in the United States, whether in Europe, the first thing you need to do is understand the basics. And the basics are, do you have strong passwords? Do you have strong identity management? Are your routers protected? Do you have protocols in place if you get hacked? Do you have response systems? Is your data encrypted? Is it basically business data that needs to be encrypted and isolated? You have to have all those aspects, and primarily the easiest one is multi-factor authentication. Because multi-factor authentication usually works just because the hackers like to go where the easiest, lowest hanging fruit is. They don't want to be bothered with trying to get it. So they'll send out 1,000 phishing emails, and if they get 2 of them, that's where they'll go. So all those things have to be in place. But now when you're looking, okay, that's just for everybody. Now you're looking at the large companies and major industries and critical infrastructure and government agencies, you need to do more. And you got to start with zero trust. First thing you have to do is get the accounting of what's in your networks. And the second thing is you have to look at what you have already there, and which is likely a defense in depth thing, and that now you have to plan. You have to plan for security by design. So all these are major factors, and all this is being forced to be changed because of the advent of the growth of artificial intelligence. Whether you call it machine learning or artificial intelligence or generative AI, the fact is that it's changing the landscape, and it's asymmetrical. The adversaries have a greater advantage, and they can easily get in where you can't. Okay. So I think part of the problem, is how do we deal with artificial intelligence, and part of the way we do this is by implementing these three different aspects. Okay. So I think at this time I'd open it up to questions. I'd like to note that this is a really important endeavor for everyone to look at, is that when we're in a cybersecurity environment like we're in right now, we have to change our attitudes, we have to change our perspectives, and we have to change our what we're doing. And this comes down to also budgets for many companies, and it comes down to budgets for government. And the problem has been, and this is universal, it's not just in Canada or the United States or in Europe, is that cybersecurity has been viewed as a cost item. It's something you do, I'll put in the security. But the problem is with almost 50% of small businesses going out of business with one breach, medium business and large business losing millions from reputational costs from breaching, and government agencies actually being shut down, particularly state and local ones, you have to really look at a new kind of paradigm. And this paradigm really needs to integrate a variety of strategies. And one strategy doesn't fit all. With cybersecurity, if you're, every industry has their own perspectives. If you have privacy requirements for healthcare, if you have certain opportunities when you're dealing with OT technologies, when you have to keep transportation running, there's other protocols you may need to follow. But the bottom line, the themes of these are practical, and everyone could develop and identify what they need to do. And this also starts with having a strong C-suite, which includes cybersecurity expertise. And I know you're all here because you're interested in cybersecurity, but the problem has still been, it's been an uphill battle with a lot of people who basically don't understand that cybersecurity in a digital economy, which we've now are transcending into it at great speed, is going to be disrupted if we don't have the basic security protocols in place. And this has been a problem. And so that's where I'd like to stop it right now. I know it's a short presentation, so I wanted to give you the opportunity to ask any questions you may have.
Hello, thank you. You mentioned the pipeline attack in the United States. I was wondering, like the oil industry is very important in Canada, and like maybe Hydro-Quebec is very important here in Quebec. Is there anything particular to Canada that the different challenges that we're facing that maybe other countries aren't facing, or maybe we're targets for different geopolitical regions? Thank you.
I think in Canada, yes, because in the United States, the energy sector is highly regulated, more so than even Canada. And there's always a lot of restrictions, and mostly for compliance. They still have a lot where to go. And also you have challenges because you have much more rural space here. You know, everything is not condensed and nearby in cities, and it's a less of a population. So Canada has to have a different kind of perspective when looking at their security, and they have to prioritize. And energy is one of the things that is being prioritized. And I know that there's a lot of work going in this, because the other thing is that most of these energy companies are multinational corporations. They're selling globally. They're involved with a lot in their pipeline. Their supply chains are long, so they've been prioritized. And this is not new. BP 20 years ago was getting, almost 20 years ago, was getting about 250,000 attacks a day, cyber attacks a day. So energy companies definitely need to be emboldened, I think, more to do more, because of the threat matrix has changed. But I think on the whole, they understand it, and they've done a lot more with air gapping and also the operational technology aspects that make them separate. But as we found with the Colonial Pipeline, not all of them have followed that thing. They followed the compliance, but they didn't actually have an incident response plan or any risk management in place. But good question. I like that. Are there any additional questions? No. Well, thank you. Thank you for coming, and feel free to come on up afterwards if you have anything you want to ask. I'm happy to do so.